Jake Morrison stepped off his small trading ship onto the busy platform of Kepler Station. The air was thick with strange smells, and the sounds of many different alien voices talking at once. He had been to this place many times before, but it still amazed him how many different species came here to trade. Jake was a tall man with brown hair and tired eyes. He had been a soldier once, but now he made his living buying and selling goods between different worlds. It was not an easy life, but it was his choice. He liked being free to go where he wanted. The station was built on Vorthak Prime, a planet ruled by blue-skinned aliens called the Vorthaki. They were taller than humans and had 4 arms instead of 2. Their society was very strict, with many rules about how people should behave. Jake did not like their rules, but he respected them when he was on their world. He walked through the crowded marketplace, looking for the supplies he needed. The market was full of strange foods, shiny metals, and technology from across the galaxy. Alien traders shouted prices in dozens of different languages. Some used machines to translate, while others just pointed and gestured. Jake was looking at some power cells when he heard angry voices coming from the center of the market. A crowd had gathered around something, and many of the aliens were making loud noises. Some sounded angry, others seemed excited. Jake's old soldier instincts told him to check what was happening. He pushed through the crowd until he could see what everyone was looking at. In the middle of a small plaza, a metal post stood about 10 feet tall. Chained to this post was a young Vorthaki female. She looked barely old enough to be an adult by their species standards. The girl's blue skin was dirty and marked with bruises. Her clothes were torn and stained. Heavy metal chains held her wrists and ankles, keeping her locked to the post. She could barely move, and her head hung down like she had given up hope. Jake watched in growing anger as Vorthaki citizens walked past the chained girl. Some threw garbage at her. Others shouted mean words. A few just stared and shook their heads before walking away. The girl did not react to any of it. She just stood there taking whatever they did to her. "What is this?" Jake asked a small, furry alien standing nearby. The creature looked like a cross between a cat and a monkey, with big eyes and tiny hands. "Punishment," the alien said in broken English. His name was Crix, and Jake had traded with him before. "She brings shame to her family. Now she must suffer shame in return." "What did she do?" Jake demanded. Crix looked around nervously before answering. "She refused marriage. Her family made deal with rich merchant. She was to marry his son. But she said no. Very bad for business, very bad for honor." Jake felt his hands form into fists. "So they chain her up like an animal?" "Is Vorthaki way," Crix said sadly. "She must stay here 3 days. No food, little water. Everyone can see her shame. Maybe then she learns to obey." Jake stared at the girl. She looked so young and scared. Her name was Zaraka, though Jake did not know that yet. All he saw was someone who needed help, and everyone else was either hurting her or ignoring her. Pain. "This is wrong," Jake said, loud enough for nearby aliens to hear him. Crix grabbed Jake's arm with his tiny hand. "Careful, human friend. Vorthaki do not like outsiders judging their ways. You make trouble, they make trouble for you." But Jake was not listening anymore. He was remembering his time as a soldier, when he had sworn to protect people who could not protect themselves. He was remembering why he had become a traitor in the first place, because he believed in freedom and choice. The girl raised her head slightly, and Jake saw her eyes. They were a deeper blue than her skin, and they held so much sadness that it made his chest hurt. She looked at him for just a moment before looking away again. More Vorthaki walked past, and one of them spit on the ground near her feet. The girl flinched but did not cry out. Jake realized she was trying to be brave, even though she was scared and hurt. A group of young Vorthaki males gathered nearby, pointing at the girl and laughing. They started throwing small stones at her, trying to hit her face. She closed her eyes and turned away, but the chains would not let her move far enough to avoid them. That was when Jake decided he had seen enough. He walked toward the post, ignoring the surprised sounds from the crowd. The young males saw him, coming, and stopped throwing stones. They said something in their language that sounded like a challenge. Jake did not stop. He walked right up to the chained girl and knelt down beside her. Up close, he could see that her wrists were bleeding, where the metal had cut into her skin. She was shaking, either from cold or fear or both. "Hey," he said softly. "Can you understand me?" The girl looked up at him with wide, surprised eyes. Most Vorthaki spoke some English, since it was the common trading language on the station. You should not be here," she whispered. Her voice was rough from thirst. "They will hurt you too." "Let me worry about that," Jake said. He pulled a water bottle from his pack and held it to her lips. "Drink this." She drank greedily, like she had not had water in a long time. Some of it spilled down her chin, but she did not care. When she was done, she looked at him with something that might have been hope. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you help me? I am nothing. I am shame." "No," Jake said firmly. "You are a person, and no person deserves this." The crowd around them was getting louder and angrier. Jake could hear Vorthaki voices shouting what were probably threats or demands for him to leave, but he did not move from where he knelt beside the girl. "What is your name?" he asked. "Zaraka," she said quietly. "I'm Jake, and I'm going to help you, Zaraka, I promise." He could hear heavy footsteps coming toward them. The Vorthaki guards were finally responding to the crowd's anger. Jake stood up slowly, keeping himself between Zaraka and whoever was coming. This was just the beginning, and Jake knew it, but he also knew he could not walk away and leave this girl to suffer. His human conscience would not let him. Whatever happened next, he would face it standing up for what was right. 3 large Vorthaki guards pushed through the crowd toward Jake and Zaraka. Each guard was almost 8 feet tall and carried a weapon that looked like a cross between a club and an electric prod. Their forearms made them look even more threatening as they approached. "Human!" the lead guard shouted in heavily accented English. "Move away from the criminal, you have no right to interfere." Jake stayed where he was, still standing between the guards and Zaraka. His old military training was kicking in, and he could feel his body getting ready for a fight. He did not want to fight, but he would not abandon the girl either. "She needs medical attention," Jake said calmly. "Look at her wrists. Those chains are cutting into her skin." "That is not your concern," the guard replied. "She is being punished according to our law. Leave now, or face consequences." Jake looked back at Zaraka. She was watching him with fear in her eyes, but also something else. Maybe it was the first hope she had felt in days. He could not let her down now. "I'm not leaving," Jake said. The lead guard raised his weapon and took another step forward. "Then you will be removed." The guard swung his weapon at Jake's head, but Jake was ready. Years of military combat training made his body move without thinking. He ducked under the swing and grabbed the guard's lower left arm, using the alien's own weight to throw him to the ground. The second guard rushed forward with his weapon raised. Jake spun around and kicked him in the knee joint, making him stumble. Then Jake grabbed the guard's weapon and pulled it away from him. The third guard hesitated, surprised by how quickly his companions had been defeated. Jake was not trying to seriously hurt anyone. He just wanted to stop them from attacking him or Zaraka. But his actions had definitely gotten everyone's attention. The crowd was shouting louder now, and more guards were coming from different directions. "Jake Morrison, what in the hell do you think you are doing?" Jake turned toward the familiar voice and saw Captain Lisa Wells walking toward him with 4 human soldiers behind her. Lisa was his old friend from their military days, and now she commanded the human diplomatic ship that visited this station regularly. Lisa was a tough woman with short black hair and sharp green eyes. She wore the blue uniform of the human space Navy, and her soldiers were dressed in combat gear. Jake was very happy to see her, even though she looked angry. "Lisa," Jake said with relief. "Good timing." "This is not good timing, Jake. This is a diplomatic nightmare." Lisa looked at the fallen Vorthaki guards, then at Zaraka chained to the post. Her expression softened slightly when she saw the girl's condition. More Vorthaki officials were arriving now, including one who wore fancy robes that marked him as someone important. He had silver markings on his blue skin and moved with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "I am Commander Thane Vo," the robed Vorthaki announced. I demand that this human be arrested immediately for assault on our security forces and interference with our justice system. Lisa stepped forward, putting herself between Jake and the Vorthaki commander. Commander Thainvo, I am Captain Lisa Wells of the Human Space Navy. I apologize for any misunderstanding, but I request permission to hear all sides of this situation before anyone is arrested. There is no misunderstanding, Thainvo said, coldly. Your citizen has violated our laws and attacked our guards. He must face punishment. Jake could not stay quiet anymore. Punishment? You want to talk about punishment? Look at what you are doing to that girl. She is barely more than a child. She is an adult by our standards, Thainvo replied. And she has brought great shame upon her family by refusing a proper marriage arrangement. She must learn the consequences of her selfish actions. Selfish? Jake's voice was getting louder. Wanting to choose your own life is selfish? Lisa put a hand on Jake's arm, trying to calm him down, but Jake was too angry to stop. She has done nothing wrong, Jake continued. All she did was say no to marrying someone she did not want to marry. That is her right as a thinking being. Rights? Thainvo laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. She has the right to honor her family and serve her community. Nothing more. Your human ideas about individual choice mean nothing here. Jake took a step toward the commander, but Lisa grabbed his arm more firmly. She knew Jake well enough to recognize when he was about to do something that would make everything worse. Commander, Lisa said diplomatically, perhaps we could discuss compensation for any damages. My government would be willing to pay for medical treatment for your guards and any other costs. This is not about money, Thainvo said. This is about honor and tradition. The girl's punishment cannot be interrupted. She must complete her 3 days of public shame, or the shame will never be lifted. Zarka spoke up for the first time since the guards had arrived. Her voice was weak but determined. I do not care about the shame, she said. I would rather die than marry someone I do not love just to make my family rich. Thainvo turned his attention to her, and his 4 eyes blazed with anger. You foolish child. You think your feelings matter more than centuries of tradition? More than your family's honor? Yes, Zarka said simply. I do. The commander raised one of his hands, as if to strike her, but Jake moved faster. He stepped between them and caught the commander's wrist. Don't, Jake said quietly, but his voice carried a clear threat. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Human soldiers and Vorthaki guards faced each other, hands on weapons but not quite ready to use them yet. The crowd of alien traders and visitors watched nervously, knowing that violence here could destroy the peace that kept the station running. Lisa was thinking quickly, trying to find a way out of this situation that would not end in bloodshed. She knew Jake was right about the cruelty of the punishment, but she also knew that starting a fight here would help no one. Commander Thainvo, Lisa said carefully, what if we could find another way to restore honor to the girl's family? Something that would satisfy your traditions without requiring her to suffer further. Impossible, the commander replied. The law is clear. She must complete her punishment or face even worse consequences. Jake knelt down beside Zarka again and looked into her tired eyes. What do you want? He asked her. If you could choose anything, what would you want to do with your life? Zarka was quiet for a moment, as if no one had ever asked her that question before. When she spoke, her voice was so soft that Jake had to lean closer to hear her. I want to fly, she whispered. I want to pilot ships among the stars. I have always dreamed of it. But females of my people are not allowed such things. Jake felt his anger grow even stronger. Not only were they punishing her for refusing an unwanted marriage, but they were denying her the chance to follow her dreams simply because of her gender. He stood up and faced Commander Thainvo again. I invoke the right of protection under Galactic Treaty 447, Jake said loudly. The crowd fell silent. Even Lisa looked surprised. The right of protection was an old law that most people had forgotten about. That treaty does not apply here, Thainvo said, but he sounded less certain than before. It applies to any sentient being facing cruel and unusual punishment, Jake replied. and I say that chaining someone up for 3 days without food or medical care qualifies as cruel and unusual. Jake did not know if his legal argument would work, but he knew it would buy them time. And time was what they needed right now if they were going to save Zaraka and avoid a fight that could hurt many people. The marketplace had become very quiet after Jake mentioned the right of protection. Aliens from many different species were gathering around the plaza, drawn by the unusual situation. Some looked curious, others seemed worried about what might happen next. Commander Thainvo was speaking rapidly into a communication device in his own language. Jake could not understand the words, but the tone sounded urgent. The commander was probably calling for backup and advice from his superiors. A new human voice cut through the tension. What exactly is going on here? Everyone turned to see Ambassador Helen Carter walking toward them with her diplomatic staff. She was an older woman with gray hair and a stern expression. Her job was to keep peace between humans and aliens, and she looked like she was not happy about this situation. Ambassador Carter, Lisa said with relief. We have a complex situation here. Helen looked around at the scene, the chained alien girl, the fallen guards, the crowd of worried faces. Her experienced eyes took in everything quickly. I can see that, she said dryly. Mr. Morrison, I assume you are at the center of this complexity? Jake nodded. The Vorthaki are torturing this girl because she refused an arranged marriage. I could not just walk away. And you invoked the right of protection, Helen said. Do you have any idea what kind of legal mess that creates? I know it was the right thing to do, Jake replied. Before anyone could say more, a new person arrived. Dr. Sam Rodriguez was the chief medical officer from Lisa's ship. He was a short, friendly man who always seemed calm, even in crisis situations. Captain Wells asked me to come check on the medical situation, Sam said. He looked at Zaraka and immediately knelt down beside her with his medical bag. Sir, you cannot treat the prisoner, one of the Vorthaki guards protested. She is not a prisoner, Jake said firmly. She is under human protection now. Dr. Rodriguez ignored the argument and began examining Zaraka. He checked her pulse, looked at the cuts on her wrists, and used a small scanner to check her overall health. This is serious, Sam said, standing up with a concerned expression. She is severely dehydrated and has several infected wounds. Without immediate treatment, she could develop blood poisoning or go into shock. See? Jake said to Commander Thainvo. This is torture, not justice. The commander's 4 eyes blazed with anger. You dare to judge our ways? Your species has only been traveling space for a few centuries. We have maintained order and tradition for thousands of years. Some traditions deserve to die, Jake shot back. Ambassador Carter stepped between them before the argument could get worse. Gentlemen, please, we need to find a solution that respects everyone's concerns. There is no solution, Thainvo said coldly. The girl must complete her punishment. If the humans interfere further, we will consider it an act of war. The word war made everyone tense up. The human soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, and more Vorthaki guards were arriving from different parts of the station. But something unexpected happened. Other aliens in the crowd began speaking up. War seems extreme for helping someone who is sick, said a tall, thin alien with purple skin. Jake recognized him as a traitor from the Zelani species. The humans are showing compassion, added a furry, creature that looked like a walking bear. Is compassion now a crime? More voices joined in. Some supported the Vorthaki position, saying that outsiders should not interfere with local laws. But others seemed disturbed by what they were seeing. Crix, the small furry alien who had first explained the situation to Jake, stepped forward nervously. Commander Thainvo, Crix said in his squeaky voice. Maybe we could discuss this more. The humans bring much trade to our station. Fighting with them would hurt everyone's business. Business? Thainvo's voice rose. You think this is about business? This is about maintaining the order that keeps our society functioning. While the adults argued, Dr. Rodriguez was quietly treating Zaraka's wounds. He cleaned the cuts on her wrists and gave her medicine for the infections. She watched him work with amazement, as if she could not believe someone was being kind to her. Thank you, she whispered to Sam. Do not thank me yet, Sam replied gently. We still need to get you somewhere safe where you can rest and heal properly. Zaraka looked at Jake with her deep blue eyes. Why are you doing this? Your friend is right. This will cause problems for your people. I am not worth such trouble. Jake knelt down beside her again. Everyone is worth it, he said. Every person deserves to choose their own path in life. Even alien persons, she asked. Especially alien persons, Jake said with a small smile. That is what makes us human. We believe all thinking beings deserve freedom. Commander Thanevo overheard this conversation and laughed bitterly. Freedom? Your human freedom is chaos. Look at your own history. Wars, crime, disorder. Our system brings peace and stability. Your system brings fear and oppression, Jake replied, standing up to face the commander again. Peace built on suffering is not real peace. Enough, Thanevo shouted. I have received orders from the High Council. You have 1 hour to leave this station with your ships. If you refuse, we will use force to remove you. Ambassador Carter looked shocked. Commander, surely we can negotiate. Forcing human ships to leave would violate several trade agreements. Trade agreements can be renegotiated, Thanevo said. Honor, once lost, can never be recovered. Lisa spoke up for the first time in several minutes. What if we take the girl with us? She could receive proper medical care on our ship, and then we could discuss the legal issues later. Absolutely not, the commander replied. She is a Vorthaki citizen and must face Vorthaki justice. Jake felt his patience running out. Every minute they spent arguing was another minute that Zaraka suffered. And now the Vorthaki were threatening to force all humans off the station. Fine, Jake said suddenly. If that is how you want to play this. He pulled out his communication device and sent a message. Within seconds, he got a reply that made him smile grimly. What did you just do? Ambassador Carter demanded. I called in some favors, Jake said. My trader friends are very interested in this situation. By my count, there are about 30 human ships within a few hours of this station. Some of them are pretty big ships with heavy cargo loads. The meaning was clear. If the Vorthaki forced the humans to leave, they would lose a lot of trade income. Other alien species on the station would also suffer from the economic disruption. Commander Thanevo's expression grew darker. You are threatening us economically. That is hardly honorable behavior. Honor? Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about honor? What is honorable about chaining up a young woman for refusing to marry someone she does not love? What is honorable about denying her the right to follow her dreams? For the first time, some of the Vorthaki in the crowd looked uncertain. A few were whispering among themselves, and Jake noticed that not all of them seemed to agree with their commander. One young Vorthaki male stepped forward from the crowd. Commander, he said nervously, perhaps the human has a point. My sister also dreams of flying ships, but she is not allowed to try. Silence, Thanevo snapped. You will not question our ways in front of outsiders. But the damage was done. Other young Vorthaki were nodding and murmuring agreement. The crowd was becoming divided, with some supporting the traditional view and others beginning to question it. Jake realized that this was about more than just Zaraka. This was about changing a system that hurt many people. And maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to make that change happen. Just as the tension seemed ready to explode into violence, an old voice spoke from the edge of the crowd. Enough of this foolishness. Everyone turned to see an elderly Vorthaki female walking slowly toward the center of the plaza. She was very old, with wrinkled blue skin and silver hair that reached almost to the ground. But her 4 eyes were bright and alert, and she moved with the dignity of someone who had lived through many important events. The younger Vorthaki in the crowd stepped aside respectfully as she passed. Even Commander Thanevo seemed surprised by her appearance. Elder Mirthka, the commander said, bowing slightly. I did not expect to see you here. The old woman ignored him and walked directly to where Zaraka was chained. She looked down at the young girl with sad but kind eyes. Hello, granddaughter, she said softly. Zaraka looked up in shock. Grandmother? But you said you would not come. You said you could not be seen supporting me. I am old, Mirthka said with a tired smile. What can they do to me now that time has not already done? Jake watched this reunion with interest. He had not known that Zaraka had family who might support her. This could change everything. Elder Mirthka, Commander Thainvo said formally, while I respect your age and wisdom, this is a legal matter. The girl must complete her punishment according to our laws. The old woman turned to face the commander, and her expression became stern. Our laws? Tell me, Thainvo, exactly which law requires this punishment? The sacred law of family honor, of course, the commander replied, sounding confident. It has been our way for centuries. Centuries? Mirthka's voice carried a note of dangerous amusement. How many centuries exactly? Since the beginning of our civilization, Thainvo said, but he sounded less sure now. Young fool, the old woman said sharply. I am 340 years old. I remember when there was no such law. A murmur of surprise ran through the crowd. Even the human observers looked shocked. 340 years was very old even for a Vorthaki. Impossible, Thainvo protested. The sacred law has always existed. Has it? Mirthka challenged. Then perhaps you can explain why I spent the first 50 years of my life as a star pilot? The crowd fell completely silent. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. A female Vorthaki. Star pilot? If what the old woman was saying was true, then everything the commander had said about tradition was a lie. That cannot be true, Thainvo said weakly. Mirthka smiled coldly. I still have my pilot's license if you would like to see it. I flew cargo ships between 6 different star systems before I was forced to retire and accept a traditional marriage. She turned to address the crowd, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. The law that chains my granddaughter was created exactly 203 years ago by the Merchant Guild Council. They wanted to control marriages so they could control trade agreements. Before that, our people were free to choose their own paths, male or female. Lies, Thainvo shouted, but his voice cracked with uncertainty. Prove it, Jake said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. If Elder Mirthka is lying, then prove it. Show us the ancient records that support your claims. About tradition? Commander Thainvo opened his mouth to reply, then closed it again. He looked around at the crowd, many of whom were now staring at him with suspicion. Another voice spoke up from the crowd. It was Captain Ben Foster, a human ship captain who had just arrived on the station. Sorry I am late, Ben said, pushing through the crowd. I got Jake's message and came as fast as I could. I brought some friends. Jake looked past Ben and saw more human traders and ship captains arriving. Word was spreading quickly through the human community about what was happening. There is more, Ben continued. I did some research on my ship's computer during the flight here. I found some very interesting historical records about Vorthaki society. He pulled out a data pad and began reading. According to the Galactic Historical Archive, Vorthaki females served as pilots, engineers, and even military commanders until approximately 200 years ago. The restrictions on female occupations were implemented gradually by a coalition of merchant families who wanted to consolidate economic power. Commander Thainvo was looking more and more uncomfortable. Several of the younger Vorthaki in the crowd were now openly questioning him. Is this true, Commander? Asked the young male who had spoken earlier about his sister. Have we been following false traditions? The archive could be wrong, Thainvo said desperately. Outsider records are not always accurate. Then let us check our own records, suggested another Vorthaki. Surely the truth can be found in our own libraries. But Elder Mirthka was not finished speaking. There is something else you should know, she said to the crowd. My granddaughter is not the first young person to be punished this way for refusing an arranged marriage. 3 others have suffered the same fate in the past year alone. 3 others? Jake demanded. What happened to them? Mirthka's expression became very sad. One accepted the marriage after her punishment. She is now trapped in a loveless life. One tried to run away and was caught. She faces even worse punishment, and one... She paused, looking down at the ground. One chose to end her own life rather than submit, she finished quietly. A shocked silence fell over the crowd. Even some of the Vorthaki guards looked disturbed by this news. Jake felt sick to his stomach. They were not just talking about one girl's freedom anymore. They were talking about a system that was literally killing young people who wanted to choose their own lives. This has to stop, he said firmly. No one should have to die because they want to be free. The human is right, said one of the Vorthaki traders. Perhaps it is time to question these laws. Blasphemy, Thainvo shouted. You would abandon our ways because of outsider pressure? I would abandon our ways because they are killing our children, the trader replied angrily. More voices joined the argument. The crowd was dividing into two clear groups, those who supported the traditional laws and those who wanted change. Jake realized that they had sparked something much bigger than just one rescue mission. Elder Mirthka walked over to Jake and looked up at him with her ancient eyes. Human, she said softly, you have done something very brave today. But bravery alone will not be enough to change centuries of oppression. Are you prepared to see this through to the end? Jake looked at Zaraka, still chained to the post, but now watching the crowd with hope in her eyes. He thought about the other girls who had suffered and died because of these laws. He thought about all the dreams that had been crushed by fear and tradition. Yes, he said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Mirthka smiled, and for a moment she looked much younger. Good, because this fight is just beginning. As if summoned by her words, more official-looking Vorthaki began arriving in the plaza. Jake could see that this situation was about to get much more complicated, but he also knew that they had allies now, and the truth was finally coming out. The real battle for Zaraka's freedom, and the freedom of all Vorthaki who wanted to choose their own paths, was about to begin. The sound of large ships entering the station's docking bays echoed through the marketplace. Jake smiled when he heard it because he knew what those sounds meant. Admiral Kate Sullivan had arrived with the human fleet. Admiral Sullivan was a legend in the human space navy. She was tough, smart, and absolutely fearless when it came to protecting people who needed help. Jake had served under her command years ago, and he knew that her arrival meant the situation was about to change dramatically. The Admiral walked into the plaza surrounded by her senior officers. She was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. When she looked at the scene, Zaraka still chained to the post, the divided crowd, the tense standoff between humans and Vorthaki, her expression became very serious. Admiral Sullivan, Ambassador Carter said with obvious relief, "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Ambassador," the Admiral replied with a crisp nod. Then she looked directly at Jake. "Morrison, I should have known you would be in the middle of something like this." "Admiral," Jake said simply. He knew better than to make excuses to Kate Sullivan. The Admiral walked over to examine Zaraka's condition. Dr. Rodriguez had done what he could to treat her wounds, but she was still chained and obviously suffering. "Commander Thainvo, Admiral," Sullivan said, turning to face the Vorthaki official. "I am here to request a formal hearing before your Council of Elders. This situation requires proper legal resolution." "There is nothing to resolve," Thainvo replied, but he sounded less confident than before. "The girl is being punished according to our laws. Laws that appear to be based on false premises," the Admiral said calmly. "My legal staff has been reviewing the historical evidence that Captain Foster provided. We have some very interesting findings to present." As if on cue, several more Vorthaki officials arrived in the plaza. These were older, more formally dressed, aliens who clearly held high rank in their government. The most impressive was an ancient Vorthaki male with elaborate robes and jewelry that marked him as a member of the ruling council. "I am Judge Elder Korthva," the newcomer announced in a deep, powerful voice. "I have come to see what has caused such disruption on our station." Elder Mirthka stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Judge Elder, it is good to see you again." "Mirthka?" The old male sounded surprised. "I have not seen you in public for many years. What brings you here?" "Justice," she replied simply. "Or rather, the lack of it." Judge Elder Korthva looked around at the scene, taking in all the details. His ancient eyes settled on Zaraka, and Jake saw something that might have been sympathy in his expression. "Explain," the Judge Elder commanded. Elder Mirthka told the whole story, how Zaraka had been punished for refusing an arranged marriage, how the humans had intervened, and most importantly, how the laws being used were not actually ancient traditions but relatively recent inventions by the merchant guilds. "These are serious accusations," Judge Elder Korthva said when she finished. "Do you have proof of these claims?" Admiral Sullivan stepped forward. "We do, Your Honor. My legal team has prepared a comprehensive review of the historical evidence." She gestured to one of her officers, who began presenting documents and records on a portable display screen. The evidence was overwhelming. Historical, records showing that Vorthaki society had once been much more free and equal, and that the restrictive laws had been gradually introduced for economic rather than traditional reasons. Commander Thane Vo tried to argue, but his protests became weaker as more evidence was presented. Finally, he fell silent, looking defeated and confused. Judge Elder Korthva studied the evidence for a long time. The plaza was completely quiet as everyone waited for his decision. Finally, the ancient Vorthaki spoke. "I am old enough to remember the time before these restrictions," he said slowly. "I was young then, but I remember female pilots and engineers. I remember when our people were free to choose their own paths." He paused, looking directly at Commander Thane Vo. "It seems we have allowed ourselves to be deceived by those who sought to control us for their own benefit. This is not the Vorthaki way. This is not who we are meant to be." The Judge Elder walked over to Zaraka and knelt down beside her. "Young one, you have suffered greatly for the right to choose your own life. That should never have happened." He produced a key and began unlocking her chains. As the heavy metal fell away, Zaraka rubbed her wounded wrists and looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me," the Judge Elder said gently. "Thank those who were brave enough to stand up for what was right." He stood and addressed the crowd. "I hereby declare that the punishment of Zaraka is ended, and that she is free to choose her own path in life. Furthermore, I call for an immediate review of all laws that restrict individual choice based on gender or family arrangements." The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and angry shouts. Some of the Vorthaki were clearly happy about the decision, while others were upset about the change to their traditional ways. But the Judge Elder was not finished. "To our human friends," he continued, "we apologize for the treatment you have received. Your intervention was an act of courage and compassion that we should learn from, not punish." Admiral Sullivan stepped forward. "Thank you, Your Honor. We hope this can be the beginning of a better understanding between our peoples." Jake helped Zaraka to her feet. She was weak from her ordeal but determined to stand on her own. "What will you do now?" he asked her. "I want to learn to fly," she said with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Elder Mirthka has offered to teach me, and Captain Foster says there are human training programs I could join." "The first female Vorthaki pilot in over 200 years, Jake said with admiration. "That is going to be quite a story." "It is." "Just the beginning," Zaraka replied. "There are others like me who have been forced to hide their dreams. Now maybe they can follow them too." Over the following days, the changes came quickly. The Vorthaki Council of Elders voted to eliminate the gender restrictions on careers and to reform their marriage laws to require consent from both parties. Several young Vorthaki females immediately applied for pilot training programs. Jake stayed on the station for a week to make sure Zaraka was safe and to watch the beginning of the changes they had started. On his last day, she came to see him off at his ship. "I have something for you," she said, holding out a small metal object. Jake looked at it and realized it was a pilot's badge, the symbol worn by certified spacecraft operators throughout the galaxy. "I cannot take this," he said. "You have not earned it yet." "No," Zaraka smiled, "but I will. And when I do, I want you to know that it happened because you believed I deserved the chance to try." Jake accepted the badge and shook her hand. "Remember," he said, The hardest part is not learning to fly. The hardest part is having the courage to reach for the stars in the first place. As Jake's ship lifted off from Kepler Station, he looked back at the busy marketplace where it all began. The metal post where Zaraka had been chained was still there, but now it had been turned into a memorial, a reminder that freedom is something worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The incident became known throughout the galaxy as the Morrison Protocols, new standards for protecting individual rights across all species. Jake never sought credit for what happened, but he was proud to know that his decision to help one scared young woman had helped change an entire civilization. And somewhere among the stars, a young Vorthaki female was learning to pilot her first starship, free to follow her dreams at last. That, Jake thought, made everything worthwhile.